Hi, my name is Aaron Linsdau. I'm a polar explorer and motivational speaker. Today we are in Green River, Wyoming to talk about one of America's greatest explorations. Have you ever heard of the name John Wesley Powell and his incredible expedition down the Grand Canyon? No? Alright, you gotta learn something because this guy is totally incredible. Behind me here is a statue of Major John Wesley Powell. Was it, oh crud, I already forgot, May something or other? I'm falling apart. May 24th, 1869. Yeah, you try and do this stuff on camera. He began his expedition in Green River, Wyoming, not Green River, Utah, and he covered over 900 miles of windy, trackless, harsh desert. Not the sand dune desert, but the Great Basin Desert of America. At that time, just after the Civil War, you'll notice the statue, Major Powell is missing his right arm. And how might that happen? Well, he was a major in the Civil War, and during an action he got shot in his arm. And back then, the best thing that they could do for people was to amputate the arm. You think, oh, why couldn't they reconstruct it and all this stuff? Well, they didn't really have good reconstructive surgery. And the great danger was that if you developed gangrene, you would at least lose your arm, if not your entire life. So unfortunately for Powell, after he got shot, the decision was made it was better to lose his arm than his life. So here we are, and he's holding an oar. Now, you might say, why do I care? Well, John Wesley Powell is like the Neil Armstrong or the Lewis and Clark, or even, I don't know, maybe even Lindbergh. He was probably the greatest explorer of the later half of the 19th century, the 1800s. Because in 1869, he put together an expedition to travel from here, Green River, Wyoming, which was just a sad little outpost on the Pacific Railway that had just come through, and start here and go into the Green River, which connects to another cataract and eventually hooks up to the mighty Colorado River and into the, everybody knows about it, Grand Canyon. Well, one thing about it, there were no maps, sorry for the traffic, I'm on a major road here. Let me see if I can walk up just a little bit. There were no maps of the area. There was really nothing. It was terra incognita because America had pretty much completed its expansion by 1869. That's a little bit better, a little more calm. 1869. And then nobody really knew what was in this entire region, which was totally crazy. I mean, nowadays we've got Google Maps and Siri and everything's mapped to heck down to the inch if you want it. But back then, nobody had a clue what was in here. So just like the expedition that Lewis and Clark put on in, was it 1803, Mr. Powell, Major Powell, had to actually decide to say, you know what, I'm going to do something crazy. I'm going to explore the complete unknown. Now, back in the day, it was Native American territory or Indian territory, or however you want to call that, since they call them Indians, I'll just use that terminology. But Major Powell here brought quite a few people out to do an expedition. Now, one of the challenges is that he brought a few people out, meaning a very few people that needed to be on his expedition, and he needed to hire other people to be cooks, oarmen, and general haulers for the expedition. And the problem is that the people that he ended up with, some of the people on the expedition, they were tough mountaineer types. He didn't bring young academics from Harvard or something because he knew they'd be pretty useless on this rough and tumble expedition. But one of the problems was that the people were hyper independent, the guys that he hired, so immediately he started having trouble with them. Of course, super independent minded guys didn't like being told what to do by some hoity-toity major from the Civil War because they're out in Wyoming and they didn't really care. So this guy, he put them together. Now, he was tough. He wasn't some quiet, little reticent sort of guy because he was a major in the Army. He, in fact, got the offer, the position. I can't remember if it was lieutenant colonel or colonel of one of the colored regiments, but he turned that down knowing that he could do better things later in life. So it was pretty incredible. He had a lot of guts. So Major Powell came up here. He put a ragtag group of guys together, and I think it was 3 boats, set off in the Green River. Now, in Green River, Wyoming, where the Green River is, imagine that, The river's relatively tame in the summer. During the winter, it's full of ice, it buckles up, it can create ice dams. It's pretty scary. I actually did a talk out here for a mining client for doing safety talks, and I got the chance to see what it's like to be here in January and February, and that's a pretty brutal time. So when Powell came out here to put his expedition together, he got a good taste of the winter, and he knew that basically you can't travel the river in winter on boats because, I don't know, it's iced in for a long ways into Utah until it clears out. So instead, he decided, okay, we gotta wait till late May to make sure the river's clear and that the weather's relatively stable. So he set out on this 900-mile expedition, truly into the unknown. Nobody had a clue what kind of Indian danger he would run into, but more importantly, how many waterfalls, cataracts, and whitewater events he would run into, because one of the major worries was that he took these these ponto-type boats, and he set them in the river, and they were designed for really, really tough conditions. But one of the challenges that he discovered that heading down the river was that these boats, even though they were very tough, they weren't very navigable. So as you're going along and you tried to oar your boat around to take a better position among the rocks to not get smashed to pieces, they didn't work that great. So immediately, even though he knew they were tough, nobody had ever done this type of whitewater rafting in the West, because I mean, there was really no people that had major boats here. There were lots of Indians running around, but they didn't have that type of boat technology, and they weren't doing those sort of expeditions. So some might argue the Indians might have done a boat trip down, but all the ones that he talked to at the time said, we have no clue, good luck, you're gonna die. So as they're going along, a lot of times they had to stop, scout out, go up a river like a regular river guide would, scout out the area, what they had to look for. Did they have to tow the boat, meaning put some ropes on the boat and then walk along the shore because the water was too violent? Oh my gosh. He ran into trouble. Major Powell lost several boats on the expedition. I think he ended up with two boats left. Pretty quickly during the expedition, as people got sloppy, they lost a boat and they lost a quarter or up to a third of their rations. And man, he was mad. Yeah, see that man there? Yeah, well, you can see him here. But he was super mad, like, Doug, you just almost cost us an expedition. Now, he had gotten supplied by the Smithsonian Institute, yeah, the same one, the Smithsonian Museum that's in Washington, D.C. He got supplied by them to take readings of the river elevation as he was going along, because this was a serious mapping expedition. And they had to do that with these 30-inch barometers that were brass cased, but they were glass. So of course, what do you think is going to happen to this thin glass pipette in a raging river on a wooden boat? Yeah, that's right. It didn't take too long for he started losing his barometers and other measuring equipment. And of course, he was super ticked off because, yeah, I almost said something else. Because ultimately, the entire purpose of his expedition was to go and map the river and provide river data. Woo, motorcycle. Took that guy. It's funny, everybody's looking at me here like, what's this dork doing with a selfie stick in Green River? But very soon during his expedition, he lost all of his scientific equipment. Everything got destroyed. And so, of course, a couple guys on his expedition decided to call it quits. They were somewhere near the top of the Grand Canyon, top meaning the higher part of the river versus lower part of the river. And they decided to take off like, dude, we're out of here. You're gonna die. And unfortunately, Powell made the mistake, or decision, however you want to make it, that he sent the journals he had up that time with those three guys to take off towards Virginia City or something in Utah. Unfortunately, they never made it. The supposition was that they were killed by Indians, but come to find out later, they had thrashed some people or raped them, so they got killed anyway. It's the usual terrible drama of that time. So unfortunately, a lot of his journals were lost. And as they went through, they hit the Grand Canyon, things got really hairy. I mean, it was pretty wild. Let me check my phone here. Sorry, I'm having trouble memorizing book names today. So I will tell you the book that I listened to that's totally cool. If you want a good biographical experience of John Wesley Powell, it's called The Promise of the Grand Canyon John Wesley Powell's Perilous Journey and His Vision for the American West by John F. Ross. Highly, highly recommended. If you want to read an epic book about this man's life, John Wesley Powell, you cannot go wrong. John Wesley Powell's specific book that he wrote, I'm looking up the name here because their titles are absurdly long, The Expedition of the Colorado River and Its Canyons by John Wesley Powell. Those two books are awesome, but Powell's book is a little more complex. It's been reprinted several times because it was published way back when and republished like in 1890 something or other. But the other book that I mentioned about the Grand Canyon Promise gives an entire swipe of John Wesley Powell's entire life. I mean, it's just mind-blowing how well he grew up and he became educated. But one of the challenges, kind of like President Lincoln in a way, Powell kept trying to go to school and he would run out of money, so he had to quit school. So he was always pursuing a higher education, but that just wasn't from what the mission was on high for him. So instead, he just kept getting pushed more and more towards this expedition until he brought those men through the Grand Canyon, popped out the other side. And once they got that information, to the east, word of it spread like wildfire. I mean, that guy became as impressive, as renowned as Neil Armstrong and Buzz Aldrin, because nobody knew what was out here. Everybody assumed he would just die. Incredible. So John Wesley Powell's life was epic, and then later he went to help form the USGS, or the United States Geological Survey, that's still in existence today. And of course you would think, oh man, with all this notoriety and great exploration, he wouldn't have any problems. Yeah, till politics comes in line. You think politics nowadays is nasty? You have not seen anything. Read the Founding Fathers' works or the time after the Civil War. Mind-blowing. So he was fighting with this much richer, more supplied guy, but Powell had the name and he had the guts to do it. It just blew everybody away. So Powell's expedition as a mapping expedition was a failure, not because of courage, but more because he just lost his instrumentation. So let me share a really crazy story of Powell, just how much guts this guy had. So he ended up having to go out with one of his teammates and people on his expedition, and they needed to crawl up this mountain cliff to take a view to see where they were headed and take some measurement. And as they were climbing up this cliff, it starts raining and this whole drama, and the other guy's able to get on top of the cliff by another route. But Powell, as he's climbing and climbing, mind you, with his left arm, he was right-handed. He got up onto the cliff where it was so steep, he was right near the top, but the rock was crumbling. He could not make it. And his, one of the guys on his expedition, I can't remember his name, of course, he came over the cliff, and they didn't have rope, classic mistakes. And he's looking at Powell like, oh man, if this guy is not going to make it, the rock's crumbling, he's totally not going to happen. I don't have rope, what do I have on me? And the guy realized, because they had been losing their clothes in the river, they were running around naked, he realized, man, I've got long underwear, I can use that as a rope. So this guy had the brain and the foresight to take off his long underwear. So he's standing there stark naked, and he rolls up the long underwear and reaches it over the cliff to get to Powell. Now Powell is climbing up this cliff, and he's holding one left hand, and this pair of long underwear is dangling in his face. He doesn't have another arm. If he lets go, he's going to fall to his death, for sure. So Powell had to have the guts to see that long underwear in front of his face. He had to let go of his hand, begin falling, grab that pair of underwear, and then his partner pulled him up over the cliff. I mean, just think about that. You've got one arm, you're on a cliff. If you let go, you're going to die. And there's a piece of long underwear hanging in your face to save you. Would you let go and grab it? Well, you probably wouldn't be in the first place, but then if you didn't have that level of courage, you wouldn't be an explorer either. I mean, I had the same thing happen. Like, do I really want to go out today? It's storming. Could I die? You're going to go anyway. So you had the courage to grab that thing, crawl up the cliff, get off there. I mean, this guy had guts to go down a river with one arm and do all that. I mean, just, even though I knew vaguely about him after listening to Ross's book, he is a new hero. He's an old hero, but John Wesley Powell, he is the man. He's an American hero. I couldn't believe it. So I'm gonna go down to Expedition Island I'm going to drive around real quick. I'm going to see if there's anything there. So I'll cut that in right here. Well, here we are on the Green River. It looks pretty placid here. It's, you know, mid-September, so it's actually quite calm, but you come early in May when the spring runoff is going. This is a totally different experience when Powell started off his expedition. Really wish I would have brought my fly fishing pole. That's my only thought, because it's not crazy here. The last time I was here, it was late February. This thing was completely covered in ice and buckling, so it was completely different look, but you can see the bridge here, and you go over to Expedition Island. I'll see if there's anything actually interesting to show you there. Otherwise, I won't show you anything. So at least the bridge is pretty neat, and definitely you can see the original bar there and all such things. So I'll poke around and see if I can find something for you. Well, I did find a couple markers here. One's the Powell, Colorado expedition. Of course, it's a little bit difficult to read because it's all chiseled in stone, but it doesn't have any information you can't find. So if you're a historical marker person needing to do your selfie with your phone, then there you go. Expedition Island, it's got a few markers around here, so it's definitely worth a stop. And if you just want to get away from the hustle and bustle of Green River, yeah, not exactly a big town, but a beautiful park. There's a couple of people walking their dogs and just jogging around. It's a pretty nice place. The Green River, like I showed before, is super calm right now. So apparently this is it. I mean, Powell actually started his expedition about a quarter-mile upstream from here and headed over 900 miles over 98 days later. Whoa. Crazy. I thought my 80-day expedition in Antarctica was wild. I'd say this little museum in Sweetwater County in Green River, Wyoming, definitely worth a visit. And it's way into the world beyond, because usually driving past Green River you're going 75 miles an hour on the I-80 and you don't really stop. But if you've got the chance to pop into here, it is well worth the time to get the world beyond experience. It's the world beyond your doorstep and the world beyond your city limits. Please like and subscribe on this video, or please like and comment on this video and then subscribe to my channel. Thank you very much. My name is Aaron Linsdale.